Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast, where we're trying to have modern conversations about the new and emerging world of weed by talking to some of the most interesting people in it. Please welcome my co-host, Matthew Hendershot. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Joe. How are you doing today?
You're in Switzerland today, aren't you?
I am. I'm in Fribourg, in the sort of border zone area between French Switzerland and German Switzerland. I'm over here on tour, and oh man, it's a beautiful view, and it's been a beautiful day.
Great. You have something you're holding in your hand, I believe. What are you holding in your hand over there in Switzerland?
I was able to just walk right into a nice place today, and I'm holding in my hand I'm going to call it a 10-ounce jar of, this is OG Kush hemp, which was curious to me. I don't know exactly how that works. I never thought of OG Kush as being a hemp product, but this is fresh, trimmed, whole flower. And it's rated, this says that THCA content is at 0.5%, but the CBD content is at a total of 17%.
That's a very high CBD strain. So this is coming from cannabis or from hemp?
Yeah, so this is coming from hemp.
Okay.
Amazing. Yeah, hemp product. And like I said, it's whole flower. This container that I have here has 10 total grams in it, and it sells for about 40 Swiss francs, which is about equivalent to $40 American.
That's a really good price. That's a lot of hemp cannabis. So tell me something. Stick your nose in that bottle. Does it have any smell?
Oh, this absolutely. Well, it's whole green flower. I know,
but hemp has not a lot of terpenes in it, so it's not supposed to smell that strong. I'm so confused. I always get confused about hemp. Tell me the smell.
This smells like an amazing OG. It smells like every OG Kush I've ever smelled. And in fact, I rolled up a nice cigarette earlier and had a good puff. And though the THC content is in total 0.6%, I copped an okay buzz off of it too.
Well, CBD will relax you very deeply. It's very calming. It might just be that effect with that tiny amount of THC can have a medicinal effect.
It's pretty
less than a buzz, isn't it? It's just like a little tweak, right?
Oh, yeah, it's very, very subtle, but a nice shift. And I sat out here on a balcony today. I'm looking at the Swiss Alps. A light rain is falling, and I'm like, I don't know if it gets much better than this.
Not bad.
I was also just handed some CBD drops. So the company that this stuff is coming for is called Swiss Cannabis. So swiss-cannabis.ch is their website. And I was also handed some CBD drops. And this is 500 milligrams of CBD in a 10 milliliter bottle. And it says that you can take 2 drops at a time, and 1 drop is 1.1 milligrams of CBD.
Mm-hmm. Good. So this is the future. This is, in medical cannabis terms, these drops are going to be everywhere because it's the easiest thing to dose. And CBD is going to be sweeping Europe pretty well. It's already in pharmacies and botanical medical stores in Europe, right? But Germany's going legal next year. Spain, I think, is going legal even more. Czech Republic, Moldavia. I don't know. Various of the former Yugoslavias. Very interesting things are going on in Europe with all this stuff. What were you going to say?
Absolutely. No, I actually did some research this morning because I did get this stuff, and I was looking to see, because I'm leaving from Switzerland and I am going to go into Germany, and I was checking on the rules, and in fact, CBD now in Germany is completely legal, and you can have it and you can transport it, but the restriction is that it has to be without THC, and the limit is actually like 0.000. It's much lower than that. It's 0.0005.
It's a little crazy. It's so arbitrary and based on nothing. Yeah. Right? There's no reason for this. It's the demonization of THC, which in fact makes the CBD more potent, more powerful, more useful as a medicine.
Yeah, both of these products that I have here, both actually list some amount of THC, which, as you and I know from our discussion with Dr. Chen, opens up those cannabinoid receptors and allows the CBD to get in there and do its job.
I know. Well, listen, keep exploring. Don't get in any trouble transporting it across borders.
I will.
Okay?
I'm not. I'm actually going
back.
to leave it behind. I'm going to leave it behind. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to follow the rules.
Send it to me. I want to try it. Send it to me.
I'll see what I can do. We have to come back through Switzerland on the way back. I'll check Italy's rules, and if I can, I'll load it right onto the plane. So, Joe, we got to pay some bills. We got a couple sponsors that we need to roll some spots for.
Happily, who are we talking about?
Well, it's Death Wish Coffee and the Death Wish Fueled by Death podcast.
It is a good podcast, and it is great coffee, by the way.
Oh, did you get yours?
They sent me a pound very lovingly, and I've been using it, and it's a beautiful way to wake up in the morning. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's roll that, and then we will get right into some news.
Great.
Whoa, how did we get on this podcast?
I'm not sure, but I like it here.
It's pretty great, but we should probably tell everyone about our own podcast, Fueled by Deathcast.
Hell yeah. Comes out every Thursday from the Death Wish Coffee Company, the world's strongest coffee.
Every week you can hear me, the Incredible Jeff.
And me, the amazing D-Man.
And we talk about new science discoveries, breaking news from Death Wish Coffee, and we welcome a special guest from rock stars to astronauts and ask them all the question, what fuels you?
The podcast is available right on deathwishcoffee.com and wherever podcasts are found, including iTunes, Google Music, Stitcher, and more.
Plus, you can now watch it live on the Death Wish Coffee Company page on Facebook and watch all our videos over on YouTube.
All right. Now you know all about Fueled by Deathcast and how you can listen to it.
But first, let's finish this podcast.
Let's get back to the show.
So, Matt, what have you been hearing this week? Anything newsy going on?
Well, the first thing that pops up since we were talking about CBD, an article that's currently running on Forbes that talks about a survey that was put out by the Brightfield Group and Hello MD, which I think is something that you're familiar with, right?
Yes, they're a very good organization out of California. We'll be talking to the founder of Hello MD in an upcoming episode, but keep going. Tell me.
So what this says is that nearly half of people who have used CBD products tend to stop taking traditional medicinal products.
This is a powerful statement. This is also a powerful statement in terms of the current opioid crisis. You know that, right? Because CBD can actually help people get off of opioids, and at the same time, it makes the effect of opioids more powerful. So it helps you relieve your pain, and at the same time, cut back on using those drugs.
Yeah, this says here that the most common reasons that people reported using CBD products were to treat insomnia, depression, anxiety, and joint pain. And that 42% of CBD users said that after starting to use CBD, they stopped using traditional medicines such as Tylenol and Vicodin.
Amazing. I'm one of them, by the way. I use CBD for all of those conditions. I came across a company yesterday called Lord Jeff that makes a very powerful CBD gummy. I took one last night and had a beautiful night's sleep, amazingly enough, which doesn't happen often enough. So I'm really exploring CBD just to see how it works on pain, insomnia, inflammation, and stress. And so far, I'm liking it. Maybe it's placebo. I don't know. I keep going. I keep using it.
Interesting little side piece here is that the survey also turned up that 55% of people who reportedly use CBD were women, and that men typically preferred THC dominant products.
What a surprise. Yeah. Well, I just think we've been trained. We've been trained to go there, and that's what happens. But I think, as people learn about CBD and how to use it with THC, I think that gender imbalance is going to even out. That's my gut. Hey, did you read the story by Andrew Sullivan in New York Magazine called Yes, I'm Dependent on Pot? Was that what it was called? Yes, I'm Dependent on Weed. Have you read it?
I didn't have a chance to completely read it. I saw the link and I went over it. I very much like how it opens with the question of, do I smoke too much pot? And then he dives into all of that. I mean, what was your take on it?
I thought it was, I really like Andrew's writing. I think he's very honest, very straightforward, and tries to be an honest broker all the time, whether he's writing about politics or even writing about his own experience with cannabis. What I liked about it is, he talks about the fact that it might be blocking his lungs so that he has less breathing capacity, because people who smoke as opposed to vaporizing or using edibles will have that experience, yes, but it's never going to cause cancer. So we know this, right? It's not as deadly or as damaging as nicotine, primarily because we don't smoke as much. But that's me. What I also really liked about him is that he talks about how it, in fact, increased his social life. Like, he was sort of in the closet about using cannabis, and he came out and he's actually met a whole new group of friends. He's talked about how it helps his nonlinear creative mind when he's letting his mind wander. It's so important. I mean, he's like me. He says, I never write when I'm high. I can't do linear things when I'm high or in any way enhanced. But it's great to explore lateral ways of thinking and alternatives to how we're normally thinking. I mean, I have a lot to say about this, as it turns out. He also liked how it expanded his entire relationship to music. And I've always thought it's really fascinating. You know, musicians say things like, cannabis gives them more space between notes. And that's why the jazz musicians in the early part of the century, and even today, love cannabis, because they feel like it gives them more improvisational freedom, if you will. And I think as a listener to music, you hear more texture, you hear different things, you hear different nuance. Do you have that experience listening to music? I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, as a musician, I mean, that's why I'm in Switzerland right now. Is my band, my musical project, is on tour, and as a musician, I can absolutely say that when I use cannabis to perform music, whether in a rehearsal setting, I usually do not smoke or consume if I'm going to play a show, because I have an obligation to an audience to do a good job. But in rehearsals sessions or in writing sessions, for me, what I find is the use of cannabis lets me turn off the sort of self-doubt portion of my brain that's always second-guessing if I'm doing it right or if that's the right decision to make. And it really lets me find the emotional core of being creative versus the technical thinking and the mental, like, building blocking of creating something that is art.
Well, there's tons of work in any creative process, but I think cannabis frees us up of that linear sort of structure. He also says, look, it helped his productivity by ending his insomnia.
Yeah.
And
that's a big one.
That's a big one. And it also, sometimes it's hard for creative type or any obsessive type just to turn the brain off. And cannabis lets you do that.
Yeah, especially
it's an instant wind down. It's an instant, right? An instant, like, kaleidoscope. Let's look at something else here. I think it's just great for that. So I recommend reading the piece. Go on. You want to say something? Tell me.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like we're just daily being bombarded, especially now in the social media age, with just so much information and news and politics and all of this stuff. And as a creative person in any format, to be able to step away from that, with the help of something like a plant, it's invaluable. It really is.
Good. Anything else? What else do you want to say? Anything else about this piece?
No, all here. I think it's great. Andrew is obviously a great writer. He's done a ton of contribution to New York Magazine. So it's fun to see him come out in such a visible and proactive way to say, yeah, I can get behind cannabis.
And Andrew, if you're listening, answer my emails and come onto the podcast and talk to us. You're a really smart guy. We have tons of stuff to talk about. You're a great advocate for this, and you're out there. Come talk to us. Okay, that's it.
The last thing for news, if we want to bring it up, and I know that this is going to irk you a little bit, Joe, because of where it sits, but I'm looking at maryjane.com right now, and they're running an article that says a leading cannabis testing lab says that 86% of California's clones are contaminated with pesticides.
It may be the case. I don't know. And Steep Hill, which is the less testing lab, is an excellent organization who I rate very highly. I just wonder, who wants to smoke? It sounds so bad for the industry. Does that high number have pesticide contamination? That's a lot of pesticide use. Maybe it's all. Do you think it's blowing across the cornfields onto the cannabis fields? I don't know.
Well, I think that's a very interesting thing to bring up, what you've just said there, because I know that Monsanto has had a mountain of lawsuits about that when it comes from corn to corn transfer. But it makes me wonder, honestly, it seems like if we're cloning these plants and the pesticides are showing up in the clones from the mothers, then it has to just be something that these pesticides are digging their way into the genetic structure of these plants, and it's not letting go.
Scary. That's
terrifying,
some scary business.
Because then you have to think about what we're putting into our bodies when it comes to food, and like we're eating corn with pesticides on it, we're eating apples that have pesticides on them, and like, is that getting into our DNA?
Well,
like,
look, you can wash your apples, but you can't wash your cannabis.
Yeah.
So come on, growers. If it's true, get with it.
What does this say about the business of clones versus heritage seeds? Seed saving in plants, like.
I think it says we always want to know where our cannabis comes from. This is why we want legal, regulated cannabis that can be tested so that people know ahead of time. You know, we live in New York. We don't know what we're getting ever. The guy brings it to us, smells nice, looks good. I'll take some. Is there a test? No. I mean, you can open it up to see if there's gray mold in it, but do I know what pesticides are in it? No. This is ridiculous. It's bad for business. It's bad for health.
Well, and the best line from here from this article that I can pull out is how they close it out, which says that the company is looking forward to working with the cannabis industry to establish best practices to substantially reduce the need for the use of pesticides as a whole. And I think that's what legalization and legitimization is all about, because if you can do it in a great environment and have a great set of standards, then conversations like this don't even need to take place.
Well, look, there is a movement, in all fairness, in California for sun-grown organic cannabis. They're branding it, they're labeling it. I know some of the guys who are doing this, and I think we need to have them on the podcast to talk about how their growing practices differ, and really the difference between sun-grown and indoor-grown cannabis. I think there's a difference, but I want to hear it from them. Don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's get to them at another time. This week's show, however, is about another real innovator in cannabis. This is an interview we did with Seibo Shen. Seibo is the inventor and the creator of the VapeXhale. Have you ever used a VapeXhale, Matthew?
I have not. I was doing some homework and looking on the website, and it reminded me of like the old school type wooden box vaporizers, with the hose and attached to the heating element. But I don't think that that's quite right.
You got that one wrong. This is one of the most sophisticated. This is the most sophisticated vaporizer you can use for flowers or concentrates. It's a $500-600 instrument. It's beautiful. It's temperature controlled. It's neat. It's easy to clean, and it delivers the richest, fullest inhalation of vapor that I've ever seen from either a concentrate or a flower. I spent time with Seibo when I was in San Francisco, which is where his office is, exploring this. He's got a whole new line he's raising money for right now of portable vaporizers. He is really a clever guy who's been at this for a number of years. He's also an athlete and very much into the health benefits and the training benefits of using cannabis. So I really want to talk. Let's listen to what he has to say right now, okay? So, just spell your name properly.
My name is spelled Seibo. Last name Shen, Shen.
And how old is VapeXhale?
VapeXhale was incorporated in 2010.
Oh.
But we launched our product in November of 2013.
Long time.
Yes.
So tell me how you began the whole venture, this whole story. How did this whole thing begin?
Well, the story goes back really far, but I think the genesis for just the VapeXhale Evo itself was when my first daughter was born, and she was old enough to go to preschool. I went to my very first PTA meeting, and at the PTA meeting, there was another short-haired Asian guy, so I kind of gravitated towards that father. We got to talking. He was a pretty cool individual, and after the PTA meeting, we both decided that we were going to consume some cannabis. He had rolled up a blunt and wanted to smoke it, but I told him I lived very close to our preschool, and if we just walked over to my house, I would show him this dab rig, which would more or less be like smoking an entire blunt in a single.
So how big was this dab rig at the time? Explain to the people who don't know what a dab rig is, please.
Right, so a dab rig is essentially, it's the generic term that people use to refer to any device to consume concentrates. And typically a dab rig will include a water pipe that is connected to some sort of titanium or ceramic nail. They call them nails, but just imagine some sort of device that you heat up with a torch that gets...
A torch.
A torch,
A blowtorch.
Yes. I would say most people in the cannabis space use something that would be more akin to a creme brulee torch. So as you can imagine, if you think you're just smoking cannabis and someone brings out a creme brulee torch, it could be
to light this nail.
To light the nail. So you're essentially freebasing your concentrate on this heated surface. And if you're not very familiar with it, it could be a little bit off-putting. So
what did you think the first time you saw a dab rig?
The first time I saw it, well, I am super deep in the cannabis space, so I was excited to learn about it. So for me, it was the next level in performance as far as, the cannabis toys. But now in retrospect, and now that I see everybody else's knee-jerk reaction to dab rigs, especially if you're over the age of 30 or if you have kids, these are definitely things that, as we talked about before, it's hard to disassociate from the act of freebasing something like crack. And, cannabis being something that is so therapeutic for so many people, I wouldn't want any type of negative connotations tied to the plant just because of the way people are ingesting it.
I stupidly cut off your story about what happened with this guy at the PTA.
Oh, no problem. So as you could guess, although he was into smoking cannabis, once he saw the torch, he was immediately put off by it. And the net of the story is, unbeknownst to me, our wives actually already knew each other, and our daughters would have play dates over the weekend. They no longer had play dates. So this was a really sore spot for my wife in that was the first time that my cannabis habit had affected, some of our personal relationships. And that's when I decided, she decided that I needed to get rid of the torch and the rigs. And I decided that I was going to design an alternative to conventional dabbing. And that's how we got started to create this VapeXhale Evo, and why we thought it was important to not only change the public perception, but also to give other folks like myself that enjoy dabbing an alternative to consuming concentrates.
So tell me about the VapeXhale. What does it do? What makes it good? What makes it special? Why would anybody spend $500 on one?
Yeah, so we designed a desktop unit. So the VapeXhale Evo is a desktop unit, as I just mentioned. And the reason we started off with a desktop unit is, from a design perspective, if we designed a portable, we would have to take into consideration the size, the types of batteries that we use, how hot it could get, because most portables people put in their pocket. And I think it's mostly agreed upon that the portables are great for convenience, but they don't give the user the best user experience.
I see.
So for us, especially given the fact I was in my early 30s at that time, I noticed that as I began escalating in my professional career and having more spendable cash, everything in my household, from my appliances to my wardrobe to my shoes, were all getting better, but the ways we were consuming cannabis were still quite archaic, and I wanted to think of a way that would not only be better optically, but also just give you a better experience. And what I mean by that is the taste, the smoothness, even the subjective feeling that you get from the cannabinoids. And I felt that for many of my friends and many of my colleagues that really enjoyed cannabis, they had tools that they had been using maybe since their college years that really haven't advanced. And the vaporizers that I saw on the market, having bought over 100 of them, 90% of them have the same aluminum cartridge heater. That is why they more or less all function similarly. It's because if you put the same engine in different car bodies, you're going to get similar performance. So for us, we knew we had to design a brand new engine from the ground floor up, and that is how we were going to have a differentiator in our performance.
So what's special about it in 3 seconds? What
Absolutely.
makes it better?
So I think what really makes it great is we use an all glass heater core. Glass is inert and non-reactive, so it doesn't add or take away from the flavor. Terpenes are at such a high emphasis at this point in the cannabis industry. We wanted to take advantage of that fact. Also, another main complaint about people that utilize vaporizers is vaporizers just aren't as hard-hitting or potent as other methods of combustion. So we ensured that our device had a high efficiency capability of sublimating the cannabinoids from a solid into a gas. Therefore, you could get vapor that is just as opaque as the smoke. And we know that psychologically, if you kind of see that opacity, you'll feel like you're getting, copious amounts of cannabinoids into your body.
Okay, well done. So today, 7 years later, since you started, vaporizers have come a long way.
Yes.
Like the Firefly vaporizer has a glass bowl, basically, right? A lot of vaporizers have sort of, in a way, not caught up completely, but are catching up to you. Mm-hmm. What's your next move?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great news is we actually, for the last 2.5 years, have been working on portable units, and we have looked at the market and segmented it into 3 distinct categories. There's stealth consumption, there's social consumption, and then there's at-the-home consumption.
Stealth consumption?
Yes, like when you're at happy hour, or if you just need to duck out of a meeting, vape pens are very convenient for that. Then in the social setting, if you go over to a friend's house, you're watching the Super Bowl, maybe you're using like a glass bong and just passing it around and using it socially. Then, of course, at home, you could use anything you want, and typically that's when people will utilize their crown jewel of their collection, usually an expensive water pipe. So we've kind of copied that model, and we're introducing a portable stealthy vaporizer as well as a portable social vaporizer, and all of the units will have significantly more vapor extraction horsepower than models that have been on the market, based on the technology and IP that we have learned by creating the desktop unit. And that is why we created the desktop unit first, was we knew that it wasn't just applying heated air to flour or oil. There was other principles in that take place, like the Venturi effect, which is if you take...
What's it called?
The Venturi effect.
What's that?
So the Venturi effect is when you take a larger volume of air and you compress it into a smaller volume. And essentially what that does is it takes the usable heat and it makes it more efficient. So if you're using, let's say, 350 degrees and you compress that air and the flour is sitting in that repository, it behaves as if it's... this is an arbitrary number, but like 160 degrees. So that's how we're able to get that thicker looking vapor without having to actually turn the temperature up higher, by tricking and utilizing these small physics principles that allow us to extract more usable heat out of the heat that we're generating.
Let's go back to the stealth for a second. Are you trying to create something that has no vapor cloud on the exhale? Is that what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we come out of this state of prohibition, obviously there are still a lot of people that have to deal with the transition that might not feel as open about being public about their cannabis consumption. So in an effort to enhance the stealth and discretion of our devices, we've developed a filter that helps remove the remaining particulate matter within the vapor, so that when you exhale, essentially nothing comes out of your mouth. Things do come out of your mouth, but nothing that reflects off the light that you could visibly see.
But what kind of particulate matter comes out of a vapor? I thought it was purely just an oil that was being vaporized. What comes out?
That answer would slightly differ based on every strain, but as you're heating up the flour or the oil, there are other things other than just the cannabinoids that are present in that vapor.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought all that stuff was taken out when in the process of vaporization.
Well, I don't know if taken out might be the right Well, okay, so the tar and carcinogens that are part of the combustion process, that is not the particulate matter that is being removed from this vapor. So the vapor, it's not taken out of the vapor because the vapor never gives off the tar and carcinogens. But there are still other things that are sublimated from the heat that are in the plant that when the light reflects off of it, gives it that white reflection. Our carbon filter removes the rest of that particulate matter out so that when you exhale, there's none of this particulate matter that the light reflects off of, and essentially...
So nobody sees anything.
Correct.
And is it a cleaner inhale, do you think?
Yes, it is a cleaner inhale. It does also take out some of the cannabinoids
it does,
as well.
Right, yeah.
So there's a little bit of a compromise there, but I think for a lot of people that are looking for a higher level of smoothness or just want to be stealthy, then that's a great alternative and option for them.
Gotcha. Explain to me the difference between convection and conduction heating. I'm not sure most people understand this about vaporizers, but this is sort of key, is it not?
Yes, so conduction and convection are the two main categories of vaporizers. Conduction is when there's surface-to-surface contact, meaning the hot plate or the heater is the hot plate that comes in contact with the flour or the oil. I always say just think about that as more like grilling or frying your flour or concentrate. And then convection or convective heat is if you have a convection oven, it's utilizing the hot air to interact with the flour or oil. So in general, convection-based vaporizers are more efficient than conduction, but like any other technology, it comes down to how the manufacturer is executing on that technology that will be the main differentiator.
Why are they more efficient? Because there's air circulating all around the oils, all 360 degrees of it? Is that how it goes?
You are quite smart. You are 100%
I have a very small
correct.
brain. Never think I'm smart.
So
but I cook.
Your hypothesis was correct. There's more surface area for the hot air to interact with. That way you get a more efficient extraction and you don't get hot spots either, because as you can imagine, the stuff that's in direct contact with the conductive heater, that will be heated first and begin charring before the middle and top layer.
Is using convection heat, is it more efficient? Is it more, do you get more out of your flour? Are you able to extract more for a longer period of time?
I think because the extraction is more even, you are able to get a more even extraction, meaning that, what's a good analogy here? Okay, so if we go back to the cooking analogy, if you're using the conductive heat, the bottom layer will begin to char before the top layer begins to cook. So when you're eating food, that's not as big of a deal, but when you're trying to change the cannabinoids from a solid to a gas, you would rather have it all extract evenly as opposed to the bottom layer going first. It just affects the flavor, the taste, how smooth it is. And this is kind of a subjective question, but I think more or less, 90% of the people would much rather have a less smoky vapor than a higher smoke to vapor ratio.
You like to vaporize. You don't like to smoke, do you?
When I first discovered cannabis, it was with the vaporizer. I wasn't...
Really?
Yeah, it was. I didn't want to smoke anything. I was recommended to look into cannabis as a way for pain management because I had been taking Vicodin and Percocets as working as a stuntman, and I was looking for an alternative. So my roommate suggested cannabis. He liked to smoke it. I had not smoked, cigarettes or put anything that I thought was negative into my body at that point. So I was already researching alternative ways to consume cannabis. I have smoked, from bongs, blunts, taken conventional dabs, and it was just more because I was curious as I saw other people utilizing these things. And subjectively, I thought bongs were the funnest thing to use. And in my mind, that's why when I was creating a vaporizer, I wanted to combine it with the mouthpieces that had moisture conditioning, because I just thought not only visually was it fun to watch, but it did have this smooth cooling effect that really allowed you to take really large, smooth inhalations.
I like your technical approach to the vaporizing experience. But yet most people don't really like vaporizers, don't you find? Isn't it something like 20% of the population uses vaporizers and 80% prefer to smoke. Is it something like that?
Yeah, so I discovered vaping in 1997, so it's 20 years, and in that time I've tried to evangelize how great vaporizers are for your health and how you get so much of the benefits of cannabis and very little of the downsides, but it's been an uphill battle. None of my friends have ever bought any of the vaporizers that I recommended.
Oh, seriously,
to them.
huh?
Yes, so, and that's why. And even as a consumer, the only reason I would use them was for health reasons. If I didn't care about my health, I would be ripping bongs and smoking blunts all the time. That I found those to be much more enjoyable, more social than using a volcano and blowing up a bag. I always just thought it seemed like super unnatural. If you were a smoker to be converting to vaporization, it wasn't unnatural for me because from the get-go, that's what I was into. But I was the only one of my friends that was that way. Everybody else was like, we like smoking, and I don't blame them. So that is why we put such an emphasis into the user experience and not into the portability, because we felt that portability and stealth, that was needed when we were in prohibition. We are coming out of prohibition. Now people are going to want better user experiences. It's like if you had to hide your habit before, people that do dip, it's like you just kind of do it when you can. But I always feel like when you could be out in the open to do something, then the people that are within that industry should provide better user experiences for people in that industry. And I think if we look at the wine industry, people love buying expensive wines that have this flavor or that flavor, and I think it's become something that it's like if you go to Napa Valley and you get this expensive bottle of wine, on Monday you go into work and at the water cooler you talk about it, and it's a point of pride. And I believe cannabis is much more kind of in line with that type of mentality than, let's say, cigarettes. And that's why I feel like the VapeXhale will really fit right into that niche of people that enjoy getting the most out of life's experiences.
So what's the stealth model going to be called? Does it have a name?
We just call it the Nano right now. That one's probably 18 months out. So, but it's built on the technology of the bottle. So
the VapeXhale bottle.
Correct.
So what do your parents think about what you do? You're an Asian American man. I want
Yes.
to talk about this a little bit because in the cannabis space, there's not many Asians working that I know of anyway.
Correct.
So let's talk about that. What do your folks think, first of all?
Yeah, my folks are 100% on board. They both consume cannabis.
Do they really?
Yes, they do, as well as my in-laws as well.
That's very unusual, is it not?
It is very unusual. I'm definitely blessed in that area. So for, ever since I started consuming cannabis, I've been fairly open with my parents. My parents, from the get-go, they knew that I just, I was into a lot of things that, I guess, counterculture type things growing up. So they just, in our family, I was always, I don't want to say the problem child, but
The outlier, perhaps?
Okay, let's put it this way. As someone that went to UCLA, that was the worst school that any one of my 100 cousins went to, so that was kind of like...
But you mean you weren't the Stanford, Harvard type?
Yeah, exactly. Only a UCLA undergrad, so... So they just kind of, I don't want to say lower expectations of me, but they just knew I was into different stuff. I worked as a stuntman as well. I scored higher on my verbal than I did on my math on the SATs. So I always felt like, I wasn't part of this Asian American male stereotype of just being smart at school. And I was, much more, I think, outspoken and brash. And I actually got into tons of fights against bigger people when I was younger, just I think rebelling. So I think for them, when I told them I wanted to do this, it wasn't that they weren't shocked, but I don't think it would have shocked them as much as if I kind of came from, or if I grew up as a more traditional Asian American. But what really kind of changed things was that my mother-in-law had remarried an Italian chemist. And not just any chemist, but he had actually discovered the process to identify jaundice in newborn babies. And my father is a pharmacist and also has studied traditional Chinese medicine. So when they got to speaking, they kind of spoke the same language. And my father-in-law, he loves cannabis. So once my father-in-law started speaking to my dad, that was all the convincing that my dad needed, just to be kind of, I think he believed like the stuff that I told him, but to hear someone else that wasn't my age that also had great professional credentials talk about cannabis in that way, really convinced him. And ultimately, that's why I've been trying to be so vocal about it as well, which is, I think people tend to listen to other people that look like them, and there's not a lot of vocal Asians that talk about their cannabis use.
Why is that? Why is it not? Yeah, why is the Asian community a little more cannabis averse than, I don't know, others?
Well, they'll bucket cannabis and like opium and heroin in the same bucket. It's really a lack of education. There's also the concept of saving face. Saving face is basically putting up a good show despite any turmoil. So you would never want people to know that you were doing any type of psychoactive drug.
They drink like crazy Asians. I've been to Asia.
Yeah, I'm not saying any of it
I've seen
isn't
people puking
hypocritical.
on the subway stations in Tokyo.
Yeah. Hypocritical ideologies aside, they're just. I think we had this conversation kind of off recording, but we were talking about the Japanese culture, how they're so buttoned up during the daytime, but at nighttime they have the craziest sexual fetishes. And, I think it's an inverse relation to, how buttoned up they have to be. So in Asian community, it's like, even if you're starving, you will put up a front like, oh, I could still afford my mortgage, everything is fine, Or if your kid's failing in class, they're like, oh no, he's going to get a Stanford MBA, next year. You just kind of try to save face. So I think something like cannabis, it's typically correlated to lazy people that are not doing anything with their lives. Little do they know, pretty much all their kids are probably smoking cannabis at Stanford, Harvard, and Yale.
Well, one thing I learned when writing Brave New Weed is that people who code love cannabis. Like as a profession, it's one of the most popular substances amongst any profession used. They love just focusing in and
absolutely. It's
which
a PED.
Really was really interesting. It's what?
It's a performance enhancing drug for.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. For coders, no doubt. For athletes, no doubt.
You see it for athletes? You use it for athletics, right?
Absolutely.
How do you use it?
I use it in order to, as you had just mentioned, in order to focus, to get into flow state, in order to maximize my ability to perform at my body's best level, at the highest level, at the highest and quickest reaction times. Many times athletes, professional or recreational or somewhere in between, the main problem isn't their physical conditioning. Their main problem is their state of mental consciousness. Many of them are thinking about their girlfriends pissing them off, or their kids stressing them out, or emails that they have to return. And a lot of times, if you're thinking about those things while you're competing, that's the difference between hitting a home run or striking out. And
what's your sport?
My sport is Jujitsu, which is a form of submission grappling. If people aren't familiar with Jujitsu, it's what they do in the UFC when they get to the floor, except the way I compete, we don't throw punches or elbows at each other. We're just trying to make each other submit. But I do compete after consuming cannabis. Other sport is ping pong, which I am also undefeated in.
He says modestly. I'm fascinated by the Asian thing, though.
The Asian thing
it's so sort of. It feels like a lot of pressure, a lot of cultural pressure to sort of perform, and it's just interesting that Chinese culture was the first one to identify cannabis as, they call it one of the 3 top most important herbs in the medicine chest of Chinese medicine, right? So it has an ancient tradition, an ancient place in Chinese culture and Asian culture,
right.
But today in American Asian culture, it's very much poo-pooed, right? Looked down upon, yeah?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, most of the municipalities or most of the dispensaries that are having trouble opening in various municipalities.
In California?
Yeah. The main reason is because of Asian opposition.
Oh, seriously?
Yep. So many times, they're looking for guys like myself or Hua to go to these events and try to educate folks. Unfortunately, although I can't speak Mandarin, it's not the level where I could communicate the advantages of cannabinoids or why just having a dispensary in your community is actually going to lower. Actually, I could probably communicate a simple message like that, but once they start asking questions, I'd probably be out of my depth speaking in Mandarin to effectively answer them.
Do you think you've been able to open or change minds?
I think to me, I've stopped trying to change minds on a macro level. I think that is much more difficult, but on a one-to-one level, I think every day. The day that I actually did the pitch, I was wearing a t-shirt. Underneath the t-shirt, it says, "Ask me about medical cannabis." And it's actually the t-shirt that I wear every Saturday and Sunday. I get into at least a handful of conversations each day.
Seriously?
Yeah.
With Asian Americans or anyone?
With anyone. Typically not Asian Americans.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of African Americans will come up to me, ask me if I'm actually selling weed. That's been an interesting phenomena. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of everyone. I've had, soccer moms, looks like, engineer types, also kind of like the meathead athletic types. Lots of people are really curious about different things that they hear about, like, what is CBD? We just heard that there's a type of cannabis that is not psychoactive but gives you all the benefits. Is that real? And for me, these were things that those questions were answered 6 or 7 years ago, but well, I guess I'm thankful for the fact that a lot of this information that I was gathering previously that I thought might be useless is now extremely useful for people.
Where did you get your t-shirt that says, "Ask me about medical cannabis"?
Very interesting. It's actually a t-shirt that Meadow made maybe a year and a half ago.
I want one.
Yeah, they don't make them anymore, but Hua had given me a few, so I had specifically asked him for it because I thought it was such a easy way to let people know that I was a subject matter expert and that if they had questions, to just come ask someone.
So tell people what Meadow is, because this is a podcast where Meadow hasn't been introduced yet.
Yeah, so Meadow, getmeadow.com. So if you guys are familiar with Uber or Lyft, I think the easiest analogy is they're the Uber for cannabis delivery. You just log on to their website. If you have your recommendation.
We're in California, by the
correct,
way. We're in the Bay
California.
Area in San Francisco.
Yes, and they're actually expanding to Oregon, Washington, as well as Colorado. But in the Bay Area, this gives you the ability to procure your cannabis and have it delivered to your location very easily and conveniently through your smartphone. You could also get your recommendation through meadowmd.com. It's a face-to-face video conference. Everything's HIPAA compliant, so your data is encrypted and anonymized, so you don't have to worry about that aspect. And they're also building out their technical infrastructure. So
of the cannabis, of legalization, you mean, right?
Well, of their
legalization?
application stack. So they started off with this kind of, point of sale, logistics and tracking of your delivery. Now I know that they're also getting into the inventory management side, also like warehouse procurement where vendors and buyers could all purchase things. So I think it's a really awesome platform to watch it grow and expand into both the supply and buy side of the
And they're just doing it
chain.
in California currently, yeah?
Yeah, but I believe, the idea is to scale this out and provide this technical infrastructure to all the other states.
Got it. When you go to events like to Cannabis Cups or the Emerald Cup, do you ever go to the Emerald Cup?
Yes.
And do you bring the VapeXhale with you? And does it get you a lot of recognition and a lot of glory?
The great thing is the Emerald Cup is the only one that we do. We like it because
it's beautiful.
It's kind of like a grower-centric event, but we do try to have presence at all the various cannabis events, either through our extract partners who will bring our machines there. And as you can imagine, our machines are always extremely popular there, and they're only getting more popular because the 30 and up crowd is getting interested in concentrates. And quite frankly, when they see that they have to dab on a torch and nail or even an electric nail, it's like their girlfriend looks at the boyfriend's like, are we really going to do this? And, that's when...
It's not a good date. It's not good for dating, is it? It's really not a good date move. No.
And, it's gotten to the point where people all have, like, scars on their forearms,
What, from touching the nail?
Yeah, everyone who's been dabbing for at least a couple of years, they have some war story about getting burned by the nail. And, we're trying to get past that. I mean, freebasing, like I said, is when we grew up in the 80s, it was, like, a really, like, ugly thing. And, because cannabis is just kind of coming out of the state of prohibition, concentrates was the one area that the media was attacking, like this brand new drug, 20 to 40 times more potent than the cannabis that you used to smoke, really utilizing it to scare people. So we wanted to make sure that, we could play our part to make sure that part of the industry couldn't be as attacked so easily.
So have you ever gone back to the guy who dissed you on the PTA and said, hey, you want to see my new VapeXhale?
I have not, although I have seen his wife a few times, and we exchange pleasantries.
Maybe it's time for for another meeting.
Yeah.
But let's talk about jiu-jitsu and cannabis for a second, because you take a lot of cannabinoids in a day, right? You're a big user, right? Would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
So I know a lot of people who use a lot and don't get anything done. Okay, you're a productive person, all right? What do you say to those people? What do you say to people who are clearly maybe overusing and a little out of control maybe and not getting what they need out of life?
Yeah, I think you just have to be brutally honest and objective with yourself. One of the reasons I do love Jujitsu is that there's Jujitsu theory and there's what actually happens in real life. And many times people have a overprojected understanding of their own capabilities. And for myself, when I was consuming cannabis, it took a while for me to understand what were my limits. So in the beginning, I had one of my mentors was a guy that did consume cannabis all day and was extremely productive. And I thought that was a really cool way to live, and so I wanted to mimic it. What I realized was when I started mimicking it initially was that I was overdoing it, and even though I was still doing well in sales, I was actually using that as an excuse to justify my continued heavy usage. So, and that took a little bit of time of reflection to kind of understand I was kind of over medicating, and despite the results still being good, objectively, I was doing it at times when I had no intention of doing, or had no proper intention of doing it. So I think for a lot of people, what I would tell them is ask yourself, why are you consuming cannabis during the daytime? Is it just because you're bored, or is there an intention for it?
What's the connection between jiu-jitsu? You were saying that there's a jiu-jitsu sort of learning.
Yes. So for me, I love jiu-jitsu for many reasons. I think of it as playing speed chess with your body, except there's dire consequences.
If you do the wrong thing.
Correct. You have to, if you understand the strategy behind chess, and if you do a move, your opponent will counter with a certain move, and you kind of play that out. The more chess moves you have, the deeper your jiu-jitsu game can get also. And the reason why I love cannabis and jiu-jitsu is for two reasons. The first reason was with jiu-jitsu, you have to be objective, because if your strategies aren't working, typically losing means that you're being choked unconscious, or one of your arms or legs is being bent to the point where it's being hyperextended. So
it hurts.
So, right, if you have the wrong strategy or theories and you're married to them, you'll continually be beat. So you have to be objective in that way, and I believe jiu-jitsu has taught me that. But the reason why cannabis helps me is not only does it help me focus and get into flow state, is that it also gives me expanded creativity. So for someone at my level, I have about, if you look at my flow chart of moves, I have about 7 different go-to moves that I start off with. And I typically go through all 7 until the person is tired enough where one of those 7 begins to work. when I go to class with cannabis, the flow chart and decision tree amongst those 7 multiplies by 3 or 4, and I just have that many more variables that I could play with and to try to trick my opponents with, and that allows me to set up more of those traps like you do in chess. And the best way to win in chess is always to have your opponent thinking he's about to checkmate you, and then they wake up. Exactly. And that's always kind of been my strategy, because even though it is weight specific, there's not a lot of guys my weight in the gym. So I'm typically rolling with people 20 to 30 pounds heavier than me at a minimum. So really understanding the concepts and then being able to like just get into flow state and see maybe some opportunities that I didn't see before. Those are all things that have really benefited me while doing jiu-jitsu under the influence of cannabis.
Okay. Good. One other thing I want to talk to you about, which is you were talking about yesterday about the stereotype of Asian men and how that's a burden. Okay, can you just talk about that a little, because you're very honest about that, and I admire it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big white elephant in the room is that Asian males grow up with the stereotype of having the smallest penises. Like black men have the stereotype of having extremely large penises, which I think every one of us would be like, yes, that's an awesome stereotype. So I've often thought about I think part of my rebelliousness was thinking man, do people really think of us as just having small penises? If so, is this why Asian men tend to, in my view, not get a lot of we get respect in the professional space, but I wouldn't say Asian men are highly desirable. I hardly ever hear of women ever saying, yeah, I want to go date a hot Asian dude. And literally when I was younger, Bruce Lee was already dead, but he was the first Asian hero that we had. And since Bruce Lee, there hasn't been another leading Asian actor. We've played second fiddle. We've had other races play our characters, which I think further fueled, I was man, Asian men don't really get respect. Most of the times on TV, we're nerds or these kung fu guys. And then now, characters that are supposed to be Asian, the guy from Dragon Ball Z, is played by a Caucasian guy. So I was thinking, man, we're not even good enough to play ourselves on TV. So it kind of fucks with your social value. Then when you see how valued Asian women are to other races, and then you match that to the social value of Asian men, you could kind of see why there's, not a lot of other Asian men that are as vocal as I am. So what's interesting is, this doesn't happen quite as much anymore because my wife and I, we don't go out and eat.
Is your wife Asian American?
My wife is Asian, and she's pretty damn hot. If you guys see a picture, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Well, you're pretty hot too. You're a hot couple.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, thank you. But back to my wife. So when we used to go out, we love eating out. So we would go eat out all the time. And before we had kids especially, we'd probably eat dinner 2 or 3 times at a restaurant every week. And at least...
Go on.
Yeah, at least once a month, someone would come up to me and ask me, is this your sister or your girlfriend? Wanting to hit on my wife. And, at first I was like, oh, this is kind of complimentary. I didn't really think of that being such a big deal. But the more it happened, the more I started really realizing that Asian men are such not a threat that other men would just come up to me and be like, is this your sister? You would never ever go up to a black couple and ask the black dude is this your sister here? Because I want to, implying that you're going to hit on her. You would be fucking intimidated to do that. You'd be like, hell no. And as I've told this story, it's this has happened to so few people, but happened so consistently to me. It's only my only logical connection to it is that, we're such not a threat. The reason why they call Asian Americans the model minority is that we take orders well, we execute well, and we don't ruffle the feathers, So if you kind of go with that stereotype, it's you know, I mean, the more I think about it, it's pretty fucking ballsy to like go up to like a couple and be like, is that your wife or girlfriend, you know, or sister? You know, I just think I kind of think it's really out of line now. So if it ever happens again, you know, like I would have like a much more kind of confrontational type of experience with the person. But, you know, I just thought of that was like another clear indicator to me that, you know, it's kind of like almost like a backhanded compliment in that, like the model minority, right? It's just like the average median income of Asians is higher than Caucasians, you know? And I think a lot of executives love having senior management as Asians because they are very good at saving face, being yes men, agreeing, and then executing on a plan, and then not ruffling feathers. Who doesn't like having those types of people around?
Donald Trump would like that.
Yeah, and then, but here's the thing, and this is why I know it's an issue, is that all of my friends, and some of them, they're like VPs at Google, Facebook, whatever, off hours, all they do is bitch and complain about these people that they have to work under.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I'm like, man, I just know, like, if you guys felt emboldened and empowered, you guys are too old, you know, they're like 40, they can't change at this point, you know, they're not going to grow a sack. But if I can influence the younger generation to, like, you know, grow a pair and like feel empowered to talk back to the dominant power, you know, and trust me, like, I'm not an anti-white person. Like, I love everyone, you know, I'm just trying to, you know, expose something that I don't think is talked about very much.
It's not talked about.
You know? Yeah.
I don't hear it anyway.
Yeah. If anything, I would say I'm probably one of the most accepted Asians by white people, you know, like, you know, so even speaking about this, I think kind of like compromises that position where, you know, I don't want to get into stereotypes too much, but, you know, like, I think I kind of skirt the line of, you know, I don't ruffle the feathers either, and I don't talk too much shit, but I just do it like kind of more in like a friendlier, like non-confrontational way, you know, so it's kind of acceptable that way.
Got it.
Yeah.
What does this have to do with small penises?
What does this have to do with small penises? So, you know, I mean, I think in the sales world, top sales guy, they always say he gets to swing the biggest dick, right? So, you know, I was always a top sales guy. I always got to say and do whatever I wanted. The CEO of the company couldn't say shit to me because I was his top sales guy. Many times I brought in 30, 40, 50% of the company's revenue that quarter. So I knew the value of a big dick. Then, if you know the value of a big dick, then you think about the value of the inverse. It's very low value. You know, it's very low value. You know, like, if your race is the least searched across the board on Match, you know, all of this, I believe, leads to why Asian men inherently are not super confident, you know? Like, of the ones that I know that are somewhat confident, they have, like, kind of similar, like, rebellion stories to me as, like, when I was younger, which was just, like, maybe I was just too stupid, you know, just, like, I was like, this is fucked up. I'm going to stand up for myself. And even though I got my ass kicked, I was like, I'm going to keep standing up for myself, because if I don't, then I will just be this limp dick, tiny dick dude that they're trying to stereotype us as. And as I grew up, I realized, oh, wait, you know, like, these rumors aren't true. And, you know, the more I talk about it, like I said, I feel like one day I'm going to have to just pull down my pants in front of everybody and show
You're pulling
people.
them down now, metaphorically.
But, you know, I thought it was really important because after I started speaking about these things, I started getting emails from Asian American males in college telling me, like, you know, I'm so glad you talked about this. I didn't know I was suffering in silence. Like, all these guys are suffering in silence. And deep down, I think they kind of have this disdain when they see, like, Asian female, white male couples and are, like, really jealous. And I don't want them growing up like that, you know? People should be able to freely love whoever they want. But if the mainstream media is kind of always showing images of, let's just call it for what it is, like limp dick Asian males, then, you know, I don't want that stereotype perpetrated either, you know? I would just want people to look at Asian men just like anybody else, you know? We're just regular dudes that like to smoke weed, like to play video games. We like chicks too, and, you know, good old Americans.
Take a sip. Thanks, Seibo.
You're welcome. Thank you, Joe.
Anything else new on VapeXhale that we need to know?
I don't think so.
What's the website called that people can find out about it?
Our website, VapeXhale.com. That's spelled VapeXhale.com. Even though we talked about some new products, I highly recommend just getting the one out on the market. It's been out on the market for 3 years, but we're still winning tons of awards for its designs. That's why I really think we were ahead of our time, and it really just needed some time for concentrates to become more mainstream, for our product to become more popular. So, and the future products that we're bringing out are actually complementary to our home unit, so it's not like you're going to have to replace the one that you buy today.
But just to be clear, you can smoke flower, just regular flower, in the VapeXhale very nicely.
Oh, thanks for setting that up. We actually won Cannabis Cup twice. So the first time was for its flower vaping capability, and the second time for its concentrate vaping capability. So it is one device that's best in breed in both, and that's why we think that's such a high value to the customer. And if you don't believe me, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So
you do?
It's essentially
a 30-day money-back guarantee?
Yep, and you could put whatever you want in the device. If you don't like it, you just let us know, and we'll return it. In the last 3 years, we've had less than 10 returns.
Good. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Seibo. That was a great interview. Listeners, check him out. Check out the site. It's VapeXhale, VapeXhale.com. Beautiful instrument, beautiful product, beautiful man.
Cool. Joe, the next episode, I am super excited.
I know, because this is going to be science heaven for you. So we managed to talk to Ethan Russo. Ethan is one of the great researchers in cannabis. He's been doing this for many, many years. He's also an ethnobotanist. In his spare time, he likes to go down to Peru and hang out in the rainforest with Indians and explore many of the plants that they have down there and how they use these plants for healing. He's an MD, he's a neuroscientist, and he's a great cannabis explorer. What he's going to be talking to us are about terpenes. Matthew, you're obsessed with terpenes, right?
I am. I absolutely am. I think that, for so long in the cannabis world that I was introduced into, it was, hey, smoke this, it'll get you high. Smoke this, it'll get you high. Smoke this, it'll get you high. And now that, I've met you and I've been learning about all this great stuff, I'm understanding that the way things smell change the high that you're going to have.
It directs the high. And, for most of my life, I thought THC and the cannabinoids were the thing that gave you the smell. It's not true. There's, I think about 80 terpenes in cannabis that Ethan has now studied and documented. And he talks about where they're found in nature, what their effects are when they combine with THC and the cannabinoids. And he is just one of the most interesting men on the planet about the mechanisms that drive this plant and how it has its effect on us. So I would say, if you're in any way interested in this stuff, tune in, because he's hard to get, and I'm so happy to have him on the show.
I'm genuinely curious if I'll be able to, because one of the things that pops into my mind about this is knowing that there are other natural products that exhibit these terpenes, to be able to sort of customize a cigarette or a spliff that maybe has some chamomile in it, or maybe has some other type of black pepper product, to see if I can start manipulating the effects of what cannabis is.
That you're not going to be able to do, but what you might be able to do is to train your nose to hunt for certain smells in the flowers. And therefore know that if it smells more like lemon, it's going to be stimulating. If it smells more like musk or blueberries, it might put you to sleep a little bit more. That's what's really interesting, is knowing the terpenes and what their effects are and how they're very special. I mean, all plants have terps, but cannabis has them in some pretty powerful combinations. That's what makes it great.
Awesome. Well, I'm super pumped.
Good. So come back next week. Listen to us. Also, my paperback, the paperback version of Brave New Weed, is about to hit Amazon. It's a whopping $15, folks. If you haven't read it yet, this is your time.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if you head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/bravenewweed, you can actually get yourself a copy of it for a $10 Patreon pledge. So maybe even save yourself some money.
Do that. Join us. Thank you again for your support.
Thank you. We're going to reach out. A huge thanks to our sound engineer, Kyle Moore, and Moore Soundworks out of Denver, Colorado. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. And before we wrap up, we're going to roll one more spot from our sponsor, Death Wish Coffees, fueled by Deathcast.
Hello, faithful podcast listener. I'm the Incredible Jeff.
And I'm the amazing D-Man.
And together, we host Fueled by Deathcast, a weekly podcast show from Death Wish Coffee Company, the makers of the world's strongest coffee.
That's right, and you can find us every Thursday on deathwishcoffee.com, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, Google Music, and more.
And watch us live on the Death Wish Coffee Company Facebook page and check out all our videos on YouTube.
We bring you the latest interesting news in the science world, an exclusive look at the world's strongest coffee company, and a special guest every week.
The guests could be rock stars, actors, authors, athletes, or even astronauts, and we ask them all the question, what fuels you?
So tune in every week to find out the answer, get inspired, and fuel your passion with Fueled by Deathcast.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.